This is the BreadWinner Podcast, hosted by entrepreneur, influencer, and sales wolf, Tyler Harris, bringing you the insights from the most successful forward-thinking entrepreneurs and influencers, so that you can rise to the top and make more dough.
Now, let's get into the show.
All right, what is up, everybody? This is Tyler Harris, your host, and this is the BreadWinner Podcast. I am extremely excited today because we have got Mr. Tyler Babin in the house. Not literally in the house. Where are you at, New York right now?
Yeah, New York.
Awesome. Well, we got Babin here. For those of you, man, you've probably seen him on Daily V. You've seen him just all over the place with this crazy crew out there with VaynerMedia and working with Gary V. But that is going to be the last time I say the word Gary V on this interview, because we're not interviewing Gary V. We're interviewing Tyler Babin. And man, I'm extremely excited to get to know you a little bit better, connect with you, and let the audience know, who is Tyler Babin. So man, I'm going to bring you on right now. Number one, thank you so much for being on the podcast, brother.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I mean, whenever you get asked by another Tyler to do a podcast, you can't really say no. You know what I mean?
I'm only doing Facebook ads, retargeting Tyler's right now. So
that's perfect. It's a super good strategy.
Exactly. So man, tell everybody, let's go back pre-VaynerMedia. So who is Tyler Babin?
Yeah, so I'm a kid from a small town in Florida. I was born in Pensacola, but I really grew up in Tallahassee. So you're in Atlanta, right? So not too far away from you.
I spend like 3 to 4 nights a week in Atlanta. I actually live in Greenville, South Carolina, but my family, we've got a place down in Destin, man. So I've been going down in that area for a long time.
Oh yeah, super familiar. So I grew up in Tallahassee, and I was always a kid who was attracted to cameras and content, and so I started making videos with my friends when I was really young and started, learning the process of editing and stuff like that. I was fortunate that I went to a high school that had a very advanced film program. So we made like a mock news show every week. So, I mean, by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I was sort of really orchestrating a lot of things there. And I was sort of like the lead editor putting that together. Finishing high school, didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't really want to go to college, but my parents were like, no, you're going to college. So ended up kind of sort of just dicking around. Can I curse on this thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. So I just messed around in like a community college for a couple of years before I dropped out, and then moved to New York about 2 years ago.
Got it. And so when did that parlay into working with VaynerMedia, and how did all that go down?
So I moved to New York, and immediately, like the next day, had started an internship at Vayner.
Okay.
I was actually, when I was living in Florida, I was a really big fan of Chase Jarvis, who, like, if you're familiar with Gary, you're probably familiar with what Chase is up to. Mm-hmm. And then whenever Gary did Chase's show for Jab, 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 Right Hook, before that came out, that was the first time I was introduced to Gary, and I was like, oh, wow, this guy's actually kind of a little bit more interesting than Chase is. Maybe I want to go work for him. So that's where I started following Gary. And so I read all the books and learned as much as I could about him. And then by just happen chance, I went to VaynerMedia's website, and they had a graphic designer internship position open. So I applied for that. Didn't hear anything back for a long time, and then got a random email at like 11 o'clock on a Wednesday one night that said, hey, let's get on a call tomorrow with one of the recruiters here, and moved up. Worked as an intern for about 7 months or so. And then under a weird circumstance, Gary and I ended up in an Uber together for an hour. And by the end of that, I was on his team.
Very cool, man. And it's so interesting with social media and this idea of pulling from different audiences, because just as you said, you were introduced to Gary on Chase Jarvis's show. I was introduced to Chase Jarvis with Gary being on that show. So it's, it's interesting how those things happen. So let's talk a little bit about Tyler Babin as the artist. What I want to know is, where do you turn to for inspiration? Is it music? Is it movies? Is it just life? Obviously in New York City, you've got a ton of stuff going on around you, and there's some that you can pull from that. But when you need inspiration, where are you pulling that from?
So, I mean, lately, I would say life is providing a lot of inspiration, is like just the natural ebbs and flows of like what sort of my daily happenings are going on, and like relationships and stuff like that. But when I really need inspiration and I'm kind of like in a rut, I'm really big on walking through the city for just like hours and hours and hours listening to music.
Yeah.
And just kind of to a point where like just walk until like you can't walk anymore, and like your brain sort of goes blank. And that's where a lot of my ideas come from, if I'm trying to force it. But I would definitely say, as of lately, so much like, I don't know, life is just like throwing some weird curveballs. And so I almost like weirdly think you should put yourself in positions that are super uncomfortable and foreign, and like let life sort of unfold, because that's, I think, where the most natural ideas and like the things you're going to be most passionate about come from.
Dude, you're speaking my language. Like the majority of what I talk about is this concept of embracing discomfort and actually seeking discomfort. And we've taken that to extremes here, with my life and with our business and what we do. Like we're actively seeking as uncomfortable of situations as we could possibly put ourselves into, man. And so let me ask you this. So let's just say tomorrow, it's Saturday. No camera, no phone, no internet. What does Tyler Babin do all day tomorrow?
Oh man.
Except
that's a tough
besides look for your phone and camera and computer.
Yeah. After I've had a thorough panic attack of not having any of my things, I would try, I mean, I don't know. I'm big on trying to just be in like a more real life place with like my friends and family lately. Yep. I get sucked into like, especially at, how fast paced New York is and the team I'm working on. We always make the joke that it's like you're in a vortex, and sometimes you come out of it and it's like 6 months went by and I can't even really tell you what happened. Yep. So right now I'm forcing to try and force myself to have more of a work-life balance and like see friends, and I'm taking personal trips and stuff like that. So it would probably be just as bare bones as it could be, just like getting, food with friends and going to see a movie or something like that. Trying to pull back. I miss that from home. Is when I lived in Florida and I had much less going on, it's every Saturday it was like I went with, my 3 or 4 close friends, and we like went to a diner and then saw a movie and stuff like that. So I'd probably try and get to those roots as much as I could.
That's awesome. That's a good answer. So let's get into a little bit of tactical stuff. So when you want to learn new techniques, when you're seeking out new things that you can implement, whether it be in the vlog or in your photography, whether you're looking to kind of enhance some of the stuff you already know or looking for completely new techniques to incorporate, where do you go for that? Is it individuals that are doing it and you're seeking the advice and wisdom of them? Is it online, YouTube, just digging into that information? Or is it just observing other people's content and being able to pull from that? Where do you go to learn new techniques?
So for the most part, like the first step anytime I'm trying to learn something new is I'll do everything I can to not go to any learning resource and to just poke around in my programs and see if I can figure out a way to do it. Because I'm really bad about, I could go to like YouTube and watch the tutorial, and I'm like, if I'm doing the steps and I'm watching it, I'll forget what I actually did. But if I really just nitpick and try and figure out the process myself, one of two things happens, right? It's like either I accomplish it and I really know the process, or the thing that happens more than others is like I don't figure out what exactly I was trying to do, but I discover some weird new pathway to either create a new style or a shortcut or something like that. But if I really need something super tactical, I'll honestly just go to YouTube and search out different tutorials. I've tried using a lot of websites like Skillshare and Creative Live and things like that, and they're great. But for me, I just need it to be like super fast, and going to YouTube and just checking tutorials is sort of my preferred method.
Got it. So I've got a daily vlog. Let's see, tonight will be episode 49. And I do it 5 days a week. It's a 24-hour turnaround. Obviously, you're used to that cadence. We started it this year, and it's just been chaos. Like, I love it. Like, I'm full time. I sell life insurance, but where the average life insurance agent sells like 150 policies a year, I've sold over 3,500 policies in the last 3 years, one-on-one, face-to-face. So now I have a full-time videographer, travels with me 24/7 and going meeting to meeting, and it's just added this whole nother level of hustle that you obviously can understand. I'd love to get some tactical, just honestly, just personal advice from you on that. When you're in that mode, in the vlogging mode, is your strategy to just capture everything, or do you have this sense like, oh, okay, something's about to happen? Because some of those best moments are completely caught off guard and happen randomly, like walking down the street and a conversation pops up and, oh crap, where's Babin with the camera, right? Like are you just trying to capture everything, or do you kind of have that gut instinct now?
It's constantly evolving. So for the longest time, it was over capture everything because of those moments. There's so many times where I can't, if I thought about the amount of moments I've missed that have happened the second I click record off, and then that's when it happens. It's like devastating. So for the longest time, I was just filming every single second of the day so that I didn't miss anything. But it makes the post process just kind of a nightmare to have to like rewatch all that footage and ingest it, or you're looking for that moment that happened. So I try to be a little bit more of a producer now. So I look at Gary's schedule the day before and I try to be like, all right, these are the 3 meetings that I know there's probably going to be something interesting that happens. So those are where I'll really focus my attention. And then the rest of the day is how do I make it as watchable as possible? So it's like, whether it's a good like cinematic sequence or I'm just, fast cuts, that as I've been working on the vlog for 2 years now. You can imagine I'm kind of burnt out. So it's like, how, for me, if I'm having to watch it, how do I make it more interesting? So I'm trying to make them a little bit more bite-sized and consumable and focusing on, the 2 or 3 key pieces of the day that really matter and put my attention there.
That's a great answer, man. I appreciate that insight. And so one other thing on vlogging, this whole idea of reverse engineering your audience, you're so ingrained in it as you're watching it, and the key is like how to capture and then keep attention, right? At the end of the day. Yeah. How do you put yourself in the mindset of the end person that's viewing it to make sure that you're not just capturing content or editing to show specific pieces that are interesting to you or you find interesting, but make sure that your end viewer is going to find that interesting? How do you stay in that frame of mind? Yeah.
It's super difficult. I mean, I can't even imagine what it must be like for a first time viewer when they discover Gary. You know what I mean? Like I can't even put myself there. So I try and make each episode have a little bit of a foundation if you have no idea who Gary is. So you'll kind of notice like sometimes there's a lot of like repeating stuff in Daily V's, like things he'll say over and over again. But for me, I'm trying to, if you've never witnessed Gary before, can you go into one episode, have a good idea of who he is, what his job is, like all those details, and have it consumable enough that if you only ever see one episode, you know who Gary is, and you have an idea of his lifestyle. That's sort of my goal. Like almost like every episode of Daily V should be able to stand on its own, separate from any other of the 400 episodes, and also be able to play into the daily narrative.
That's actually brilliant, man. And it's honestly like looking at a book and like, hey, if they were to come in at chapter 18, would they understand the whole book? Or not even understand it, but will they still be able to take value and be impacted by that one chapter without having to go back and read all the leading up to that chapter, which is super important, man.
It almost, I've equated it to, have you ever read the book 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene?
I have not.
It's a really interesting book on just like strategy of life. You should check it out. But it's designed like a textbook. Like you can read it front to back and it makes sense and it's contextual. But you can also go in and like take little excerpts from each piece. And so that's something I'm always referencing is like how I'm trying to approach content creation.
That's awesome. So now when you're in the post process, when you're editing these videos, are you someone that likes to edit big chunks down into kind of your basic framework of what you're going to be working with and then look at adding the music into it? Or are you someone that likes to have the music set first and then let that kind of guide you in how you edit it? Coming out of the day, I generally know the overall vibe I'm going to go for. Okay.
So if it's obviously like a heavy emotional day, I'm like, cool. I'm already thinking like piano, violins, like anything that'll like pull like at your heartstrings. So I know what I'm going to try and make coming out of the day filming. But I do like to have music selected first. And then the music helps sort of drive my edits, which is even in like my personal work, I can be like working on a project for forever, but until I know what the music is and that sets my tone, I'll never finish it. Music is such a big driver for everything I do.
Not being an artist myself, is that common or is that unique?
I think so. I mean, from the editors I've talked to, like from an actual like editing strategic standpoint, definitely like having music and you have like your beats and you know like where you're trying to like land cuts is pretty consistent across the board. But I think I'm on a slight extreme. Like I kind of like am running around with a chicken with its head cut off until I know what the music is.
That's awesome. I love that, man. So we talked about Babin before the VaynerMedia. Let's talk about him now, and just what have you seen has been the biggest difference in who you are, how you see the world, how you operate since being plugged into this just incredible machine? Like, who are you now versus then, and what's that look like for you?
It's funny. One, I was a kid, and now it's like I'm 24, but I feel like I'm 40. Like, I mean, New York kind of does a number on you, but it makes you grow up. So it's funny. I think my parents, like, for a while, it like took a while to like recognize me because I changed so much.
Wow.
And I mean, it's been 2 years of an absolute whirlwind, right? Like, it's been a blur, and trying to like nitpick how much has actually happened in the last couple of years is tough. But one has made me realize that like anything's possible, because if 2 years ago you would have told this kid who was like boarding a flight in Florida what his life was going to look like in 2 years, I would have laughed you out of the room. I was like, there's no possible way any of that's going to happen. So now it's made a situation where I literally think everything is in play always forever. Like, and I can think of the most abstract, ridiculous idea, and I'm like, no, that checks out. Like, I think if I like put my energy there, 6 months to a year, I can start putting some real pieces in place.
That's the best feeling ever, right?
It's incredible, dude.
It's
like,
man.
I feel like I've like really unlocked like a secret, and like it seems like the rest of the world doesn't know about it, but it's crazy. Like, you can do anything.
I was having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day. He's like, dude, you got this going on, and talking about all these things that have been happening in my life. And he was talking about all these incredible things happening in his life. And I was like, man, but isn't it awesome to be able to look at those situations and been like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, of course that happened. Like, it's just all like, of course things are falling into place because the intent's right and the work ethic is behind it. And so of course these things will happen. Do you have now, and I find myself doing this and I try not to, but do you have like this complete and utter disrespect for the lack of effort that other people put in on a daily basis? Like, it's almost hard to talk to other people sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, and like I was saying, like living in like this vortex, it's honestly hard to even like you said, I mean, it's tough to have conversations with people sometimes, you know? And I think it's natural. I think that, you know, whenever you're sort of like entrepreneur or like have an entrepreneur mindset and you take, you know, really different paths, you start to see the unlocks. But like, if you live a life that's very much based off like the system, as I call it, of like, you know, you go to school and then you go to college and like you do everything right and you make those steps, there's sort of only one path for you until you're like, wait, and you start looking around, you're like, there's all these other paths that you can be on. And so when you step onto one of those other paths and you start seeing all the weird unlocks in the world and like how things fall into place, it is just like super clear and understanding to me. So I'm very empathetic to someone that's like sort of lived like one track their whole life. It's tough to think and everything's possible. And it's tough to put in that extra amount of effort because maybe it just doesn't seem like it's going to work no matter how hard you go at it.
And do you look back at that time like, okay, you just moved to New York. You're just starting on this whirlwind. I think back to my life and when that happened just 3.5 years ago. And was that not such a fragile piece of time where you could have gone one or two ways? Like you could have embraced it, gone all in like you did, or you could have easily failed and not put your 100% in, and you would have been washed out and you would have been back to doing something else. And it was that one defining period of time that has now set you on this trajectory to where, just like you said, in your mind, there's not a single thing that's not possible.
Yeah. I mean, so it's funny you say that. So after my 6 months of internship, I got an email one day that said, thanks for all the hard work, but we don't have a job for you. So this is going to be your last day.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And I remember I walked out of the office and I'm standing in Midtown Manhattan, and it was just the one single tear that starts dripping down my face. And I was just what am I going to do? Yeah. And so, because at this point, I'm shit, I don't have a college degree. I haven't done much of anything to prove people what I'm capable of doing. And so I had a real moment where I was all right, I guess I'm moving back home.
Yeah.
I tried and it didn't work out. And so to think of being at that crossroads, but I ended up staying and hacked together a way to make it work. I just can't even, I don't even want to think about my life, what it would have been if I would have left. That's awesome. It's so crazy. But dude, if you just go all in and like you said, you're the intent's right. And it's also about being self-aware. You know what I mean? You have to know who you are. I knew that I'm meant to do something. Yep. But yeah, man, it was a very fragile time. It could have gone.
And it's such an incredible feeling now. I know for you to look back and know that in that moment that you did go down the right road and that you're there now for a reason, that you've earned it. You've earned the right to have that feeling of being just powerful, right? It's incredible. One thing that I do want to ask, and I love asking people this because it always puts them on the spot and creates this is actually, you know what? This is how you got on the podcast, is because I asked Jeff Castillo this very question. So who would you like to hear on the BreadWinner podcast here in the future? Oh man. Can I reference my Instagram for 2 seconds?
You can. I'm trying to think of actually, because I know that there's definitely people I want to see on. I would say, so I've got 2 people in mind. Okay. 2 video creators that I'm insanely inspired by. The first one would be Sam Evans, who is a photographer and videographer based in Australia. Okay. And then also to have a female side, and a girl named Anna who lives in Brooklyn. And I can't pronounce her last name, but I'm going to screenshot it and send it to you, who's another just people who are inspiring to me. Yeah. Those would be my 2. But Sam is an absolute killer. He's 21 and he's doing all these insane brand deals, and he inspires the shit out of me every day. Yeah. So I'd love to get a little bit of a peek deeper into his life.
Awesome. Well, just like you said, man, you just put that, the universe is now in motion and making that happen. Yeah. So I appreciate that. So, man, tell everybody where they can find you if they want to learn more about you. Obviously, connect with you on social, but if there's anything else that you want people to go to and check you out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm most active on Instagram, so it's just at Babin. I'm trying to get more active on Twitter, so that one's at Tyler_Babin. I'm fighting hard to get at Babin on there, but they're giving me a hard time. Those are the real 2 places to get at me. Also TylerBabin.com, which is it's sort of a funny joke now because TylerBabin.com hasn't been updated in 3 years. So if you want to see all my really old work, that's a great place for it. But yeah, I mean, those are the 3 places to get at me. I want to talk to everyone in the world, so I'm super open to collaborations and chatting, and that's pretty much it.
Is there a BobbyBabinsBeefJerky.com yet?
I'm making some real moves on it. I'll tell you what, it's so funny, the people that come out of the woodwork. I've had 2 distributors actually contact me yo, we can make it happen. And I was oh my God.
Yes.
This is insanity.
I mean, for your sake, I hope that's not your legacy, is the beef jerky. I mean,
I really hope not, but,
but a check would be nice.
It's a solid plan B.
Yes, absolutely. Well, man, I can't thank you enough for being on here. I know, obviously, your schedule is insanely hectic, but man, kudos to you, honestly, for taking that on. And taking it on in stride, man, and reaching that defining moment and choosing the right path, dude. There's so many that don't, and it's so much fun, and it's so inspiring to see those that have, man. I love it. So thank you so much for being on, man. Yeah,
absolutely. I appreciate you having me. This was great.
And with that, this is the BreadWinner Podcast. Again, I am your host, Tyler Harris. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button and leave a review on this episode. And until next time, we'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to the BreadWinner Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating on iTunes. For a chance to be on the show, send a screenshot of your iTunes rating to @TylerHarris page on Instagram, where he'll pick one person every single week. See you next time on the BreadWinner Podcast.